Okay, to prepare your pattern, you can print it up on cardstock and then cover it with contact paper, clear contact paper. They do make colored contact paper, and you want it on blue or green paper. It's easier on the eyes, depending on the color of thread that you're using. So you can choose your paper, but don't use anything bright like white or just really bright colors. If you're using white thread, obviously if you used white paper, it's not going to show up easily. You can print this up on colored paper and run it through a laminating machine, and that makes a really nice sturdy pattern. You definitely want to coat your cardstock with some sort of a plastic covering, even Scotch tape or something like that if that's all you have, because you're going to be sticking pins in there, and when you're pulling on the lace, you're going to be tearing that cardboard, and it's not going to be holding your pin steady, and the shape of your lace is not going to be uniform if your pins are not stable. The other thing you're going to want to do, and I didn't do this in the beginning because I thought it wasn't necessary, but the traditional way, I believe, is to lay your pattern on top of some cardstock and just prick the pattern, and then you would have the holes in your cardstock. But if you print it up on cardstock, you can eliminate that step. But the other reason for coating your pattern with plastic is you don't want any of that toner from your printer to get on your lace. So the step that I skipped the first time I did a pattern was I did not prick my holes ahead of time. I got lazy and I just said, I'll just stick my pin in them when I get it to the pattern. But once you start making your lace, you're going to be covering up and you're not going to be able to see those pins very easily. And so if you have the hole already pricked, then you can find that hole easier to stick your pin in, and you'll see that when we start. But I've done a few of them already, and a pricker is anything that has a needle sticking out of it. This is just a piece of wood. This came with, I believe it came with this pillow when I bought this one, and it's pretty good. It's easy to hold, but when you make your little holes in your pattern, you want to be sure you hold your tool straight up and down. You can also use a pin vise like this and stick a needle in there. You want to use a fine needle. You don't want a needle that's really big, because it's going to make too big of a hole for your, and it won't hold your pins steady. So you want the hole that you prick to be tinier than the pins that you're using, and that's something else. You want to use fine pins with a small head like that. I like them a little bit longer than that, but this is what I have handy right here. But when you buy pins, buy the ones that are fine. So go ahead and prick your pattern, and then we'll get ready to put it on the pillow. I'm going to place the top of my pattern about 2 or 3 inches from the top of my pillow. I want to have room for my pin cushion up here, but I don't want it so low that I don't have room for my bobbins to hang down here. So I'm going to just position it with that in mind. And you want to pin it down at least in 4 corners, and use these little small-headed pins so that they'll sink in and not get in the way of anything. So I'm just going to pin this down quickly. And you don't want anything sticking up. You want to put enough pins to keep it from sticking up. And then we're going to want to cover the edges of these pins and the edges of the fabric, because when you're sliding your bobbins back and forth across the pillow, you don't want them grabbing onto the pillow or to these pins. So you need fabric that is bigger than your pillow, and this was all the blue fabric that I had on hand, and it doesn't quite cover my pillow. You want it bigger than your pillow, about 3 or 4 inches on either end. So, but just to show you how to do this, I'm just going to use this fabric that I have. You want the top edge to be a fold. It doesn't have to be a double fold like this. You can just use any piece of fabric that you have and just fold the edge and iron it down so that it's a nice sharp edge. And cover up the pins that you pinned the pattern down with. And I'm going to try to put my pins out of the way of my bobbins since my fabric is not big enough. So my bobbins won't be up here, so I'm going to stick my pin down in the top. But normally I would be putting my pins toward the outside. And then I want to tug on this. Let me move it over just a little bit because I'm hiding my pinholes there. So I want to tug on this and make it really firm, a really firm edge here. You don't need a lot of pins, just enough to keep this in place. Then I'm going to do the same on this other side. These are some steps that I didn't think were, I'm like, why are they doing that? We don't have to do it the traditional way, but it does help. You definitely don't want to skip this. And then you can cover up as much of the pattern as you want because you can always move this cloth down, but I'm going to do it there because I'm not going to let my bobbins hang too far down to the bottom anyway. So right here is good. And same thing, you want your pins out of the way, but you want this pulled pretty tightly across the bottom. So now my bobbins have a nice smooth area to lay on.